Spyro the Dragon, a game beloved by many gamers who started with the PlayStation in the 90s. Many remember it by its zany graphics, its timeless enemies, and its main character. However, what no one knows is that there was a dark side to the story in the early games. The truth behind Spyro has never been told, or even heard of, at least until now. I was a beta tester for Sony back in the late 90s. I got to try out all sorts of different games before they were ever announced. Some were good, others were bad, and a good few were even creepy. One of which was the original beta prototype for Spyro the Dragon. When the staff met to discuss the ideas for the game, ideas were tossed left and right. Subjects such as the main character's design, the overall gameplay, and even the objectives were discussed in full detail. I won't lie, from what I heard about the meeting, some of the ideas made me cringe. One idea was that Spyro's nemesis would be a murderous villain who decided that he wanted to rule the Dragon Realms. This idea consisted of Spyro wrestling his own race but put into extinction, and vowing to gain his revenge upon the enemy. The idea was withdrawn immediately, due to the graphic nature of the opening scene. One of the staff who denied this idea said that such a vivid and disturbing scene would not be tolerable for a kid's game. In the end, the concept consisted of Spyro's nemesis, Nasty Nork, turning the Elder Dragons into crystals, and Spyro adventuring around to save them. With this, the game production began. The game production went well, and after some months of work, the prototype was completed. I was notified that the beta test would soon begin. It had been some time since I had tested the game, and I was more than ready. I scheduled my test for that weekend and got myself ready. Soon after my scheduling, the prototype disc disappeared from the company. We knew it was someone within the company itself, so we figured that there was still something that needed done. After searching for hours on end, one of the designers came forward saying that they had found the disc outside. The designer said that it was his fault, and that they had forgotten to completely zip up their bag as they were leaving and tripped over the sidewalk. This was not good, even that the disc used for beta testing were very, very fragile. When we inspected the backside of the disc to check for scratches, we only found one single scratch that looked like a smile. After I made a joke about the situation, we laughed it off and prepared for the testing. We inserted the disc into the PlayStation and began playing. Something odd began right after the Sony PlayStation logo disappeared. As the game began to produce static on the screen, given what happened to the disc, this was to be expected, but it didn't stop. We reset the game and tried again. This time the logo didn't appear and it just went straight to the title screen. There was no music, but of course, given Stephen Copeland was still finishing the tracks for the levels, it was also expected for this to happen. We decided to start a new game, but when the new load screen popped up, we found a save file already on it. Normally this wouldn't be a problem, as the designers test a game first and make sure there aren't any glitches. However, the game's save states would hold an image on the world that you were on. When the screen came up, it was a static-like image that looked like white noise on a TV screen. We looked questionably at this, and wondered what it was. With a slight bit of hesitation, we decided to reset the game and check the data by keeping the PlayStation covered up. As I tried to reset the game, the screen filled with static again and wouldn't stop. One of the staff noticed the image within the static and took a picture of it for investigation. It was becoming obvious that the disc had been tampered with, and we had to figure out what else was wrong with it. As a staff member looked at the picture on the computer, the screen went back to normal and I decided to start from the static save to find out what in the world was going on. As the game started, Spyro flew on the screen like the designers wanted. However, instead of "The adventure continues," the screen read, "Welcome to Purgatory." This startled me somewhat, but I wasn't going to be deterred by a strange message. The game began and I was placed in Arton's home. A few moments after the game started, music began to play. Confused by this, I called Stuart Copeland to ask if he had added music to the prototype disc. He told me that he had, but only to the home worlds. As the game volume was turned up, Stuart asked if the disc was working properly due to the skipping of the music. We told him that there had been some issues getting the disc to start, to which he replied that there might have been problems with the disc itself. After thanking him for his time, I continued playing. So far, I didn't like that there were any gameplay issues. This relieved me. until I decided to enter one of the portals. Given this was a prototype, all the portals were accessible so I could test them. Stone Hill was my first stop. As I entered the area, the music started. However, the music wasn't the original piece that Stewart made, or at least it didn't sound like it. The music sounded like a male chorus singing, which actually would not have been a bad choice of music, until the original piece of Stone Hill started playing. The piece sounded twisted and slightly sped up. This began to bug me, and I was starting to get suspicious about what was going on with this disc. I played through it, trying to collect everything as fast as possible. It was here that I decided to test what would happen if I touched one of the dragon statues. As I stepped on one of the pedestals, the dragon statue shook. I read the name of the dragon to see if it was not tampered with, and saw the words, Rescued Lindar. What appeared wasn't a dragon, but a transparent silhouette of the original dragon's body. The shaky, eerie voice said, "Thank you for releasing me." Unlike his original dialogue, where he would give you a hint, I decided to immediately leave after rescuing the rest of the dragons, which said the same thing, and were depicted in the same way to go and try a different level. I chose to go to Toasty, the boss of the artisan home, as it showed Spyro flying as planned, but something went wrong. Spyro looked as if he had hit one of those imaginary barriers that would be found in Stone Hill and began to fall into the scenery. The words, "It's time for your voyage to end," appeared on the screen. I fell into the level for Toasty and immediately saw everything on fire. Asking the designer about this, he denied the fact that they did that. This bugged me, and I figured that it would be a great choice to see what was done to the game. After a few more moments, a deep chant began to play as the music began. As the level continued, the chant grew louder and louder as I reached Toasty, the boss. What awaited me wasn't Toasty, but Nasty Nork. I asked the designer if Nasty was the boss of each boss stage, and he said no. This was definitely becoming troublesome. I decided that I would toast Nasty and stop playing the game so that we could be done with it. I stepped up and challenged Nasty, who went into one of his one-line monologues saying, "Eternal damnation awaits you." That was it. I had had enough, and started the fight. The fight did not go so well. Nasty, instead of shooting the crystal rays, basically shot fireballs at Spyro. These were easily avoidable, but still didn't sync at all with the original design. I was able to get close enough to frame and hit him right on his mark. As he was flamed, his head began to catch fire as they began to run around in a cartoonish fashion. I found this somewhat humorous until his head didn't lose the flame, and continued attacking, this time hitting me with waves of fire. Sparks lost a color and the match continued. This time, his armor began to catch fire after being flamed. As the same running around, he stopped and began attacking, as if the fire wasn't really bugging him. The next round began as he would run after Spyro and try and clobber him. I was able to get hitting it after losing another color on Sparks. This time, his entire body was on fire, and the skin disappeared until Nasty became a skeleton. I breathed a sigh of relief, thinking that it was finally over, but I was dead wrong. The skeleton started to move and jumped, and as it hit the ground, the area that Spyro and Nasty stood on broke apart, being replaced by lava. This looked bad, as Spyro had no other footholds or platforms to fly to. With this, Nasty aimed his crystal sphere at Spyro and launched a blast towards him. Unable to move, I jumped to try to avoid the blast. It still hit Spyro and took him down to his last hit. This began a cinematic where it would show Spyro leaning down as if injured. The chanting returned, and even more slow and eerie. Nasty laughed evilly and launched one more blast at Spyro, who was hit. The blast turned him into crystal like the other dragons. The blast was also powerful enough to knock Spyro's crystallized form into the lava. I watched in horror as he simply and slowly sank in and the screen went black. The game over screen didn't pop up. Instead, another static image placed itself on the screen. It looked to be the same as the one where that we took the picture of earlier, but a slight bit clearer. What we saw startled us. We saw Spyro, along with the rest of the dragons we supposedly rescued, in a shadow-like area. They were all skeletons and floating in the darkness surrounding them. The words "Game Over" appeared in creepy slime-like letters over the image as a loud laugh came through the speakers. We immediately turned the game off and looked at each other. We knew that there was no way that this is what was truly wanted for the game, prototype or not. When we brought this up at the next staff meeting, I pointed out each little detail and everything that happened to us. When we asked for any information regarding the issue, nobody knew what to say. It's still undetermined who made this beta of the game, but one thing is for sure, no one else would ever see it for as long as we lived. And that, my little shadows, was Spyro the Dragon Tempered Beta, or Tampered Beta. A Spyro the Dragon lost game creepypasta. My final thoughts on the story? A lot of people have been asking me for a new Spyro the Dragon gaming creepypasta to be done because I haven't done one in a while, and given the fact that I've been doing a lot of Mario gaming pastas recently, due to the fact that I love those kinds of stories, I thought it would be kind of nice to sit there and kind of take a little bit of a break from it temporarily and give a little bit of something that you guys have been asking for. And given how the story kind of went out and everything, I might actually start doing some more Spyro creepypastas to be, because I find them as well to be enjoyable. Now, as per every start off with these creepypastas, there actually is a mentioning at the very beginning from the author, who says, "This pasta might seem a little bit shorter than what I usually wrote in the past, but I tried to make it clear cut. Also, this is my first creepypasta in half a year or so it won't be perfect." And I've actually got a lot of things to say about this creepypasta, mostly a lot of good things, but also some things that need to be worked on. But before I actually get into that, like with every single one of these videos, let's actually read the comment section and see what everybody else thinks on this matter. One says, "Why does this have a Legend of Spyro category?" I'm not 100% sure. Another one says, "Why is this label?" Mostly just a lot of, people asking about tags and things like that. So, yeah. There's really not a whole lot going on with the comments section. It's basically just, well, it's really just, nothing really else more. There's really not a whole lot of reviews. It's just a lot of people asking about specific tags that are supposedly was actually in the thing itself. But, of course, there's none of that. So let's move away from that and let's actually get into the main startup of the story. Now, the very beginning startup of this creepypasta was actually really well done, I have to admit. The fact that there was a proper introduction with the whole thing, specifically talking about a game like Spyro the Dragon that's loved by many gamers, and ultimately going into a little bit of detail about everything that went on with the game itself, but also, also getting itself into the main meat of the story. Now, I have complained about people not really putting proper startups or proper paragraph startups with their creepypastas, but this one actually did a very good job with it. Given the fact that it actually has a proper hookup to it, specifically mentioning Spyro the Dragon and ultimately giving like a little bit of a small talk about what exactly it is and what's good about it before getting into the part where, the protagonist starts to speak about there being something about Spyro that's actually never been told, which, although it may seem a little bit overused to an extent, in this creepypasta, it actually kind of played out well, and really kind of, interested me a lot more with the story itself, which is actually a really good thing. And, with it being the first paragraph, that's actually a good thing, because it's only continuously hooking me into the story more and more. I mean, I'm wanting to sit there and actually read more into the end of the story itself, and actually see what really is going on. But another thing I also liked was the fact that the whole startup more or less was about the protagonist more or less being a person who tested out beta games during the 90s, and one of those games was Spyro the Dragon. And even giving a good example at the even pretty much going along the lines of explaining, a couple of things that were going on for the original prototype of Spyro the Dragon, which, again, is an extremely interesting concept because, like with video games, like with video games and other episode ideas and concepts, these kind of things take a lot of time. And more often than not, prototypes and things like that are usually done for games as a way of trying to get like a good startup or a good base on what exactly is going to be made. And of course, the idea of having beta testers for the games, especially back in the 90s when video games were really starting to get popular, it's completely and utterly believable, in that kind of manner, because that's something that, people really enjoyed. So, of course, beta testers were, I'm sure, quite common back then. And probably still even now, although it's probably more of a job than anything. Now, another thing too is I loved the explanation. Actually the example of one of the things that was discussed in one of the board meetings about what was going on, what was originally going to be made as like a darker concept for Spyro, which, in this specific paragraph where it actually discusses it, about the whole thing about Spyro's nemesis basically wanting to kill off all the other dragons and, wanting to kill off all the other dragons to become, the head of the dragon realm, and Spyro wanting to avenge all of them, is honestly really dark, but extremely, but honestly really, really, really good. I mean, I'd love to sit there and see a dark Spyro game, just as much as I'd love to sit there and see a dark Mario game. Although technically we kind of got that with Luigi's Mansion, which more or less was actually a pretty dark game to begin with. But, for something like that, being considered is interesting. I actually think that if that had actually been included with the game itself, it probably would have made it a lot more interesting than what it is now. I'm not saying that the original game that we have now is bad. It's definitely a very good game, but it still would have been interesting to see a little bit of that. But also I like the fact that, that the people automatically turned the whole thing down, and later on it was replaced with Nasty Narc, turning the dragons into crystal and things. Basically the same kind of premise that we have now in each Spyro game. Which is, again, pretty believable, very good. Now, the prototype and the explanation, of course, later on, after the scheduling, the prototype disappearing from the company. Now, it does make a mention in the story that it was about a couple of hours or so that was looked around to try and find it before it was found outside, with a large scratch on its face. Scratch that, with a large scratch on the disc itself, which, it's really interesting, to be honest, because, the main thing that I honestly got with that was one of the developers getting particularly angry or something like that at the fact that the original concept was not going to be used and probably sitting there and trying to mess with the disc in one way or another. I mean, that's exactly the kind of vibes that I wound up getting with this. I mean, I know that it's not really explained too much later on in the story itself, but even then, it's still something that's, would have actually been kind of believable if you think about it. But there's also an explanation about the designer saying that it was his fault, and that how he had forgotten to zip up his bag and that it had fallen to the ground. So, okay, understandable, believable, accidents happen. So then we continue on, and, there's actually something that I'm going to say right now. While there are cliches in the CreepyPasta, there's something that this story actually manages to do that not many actually take. This is something that not a whole lot of pastas have actually done, but this one does very well. The inclusions of the cliches, at least a good portion of them, are actually well done because of the fact that there's a proper explanation as to why these are in the game. For example, the static and things like that were, well, the game producing static was because of, I think, a couple of issues within the game. Another thing, too, was the fact that there was no music, but, of course, a proper explanation was the fact that there were still tracks that needed to be added to the level, given the fact that it was only a beta, and things like that, and the fact that there is a brand new game on there because, as the story explains, designers usually test the game and make sure that there's no problems with it before there's actual beta testers that actually play the game to make sure it runs smoothly. Very, very believable, and actually excuses a good portion of the cliches in this paragraph, which is a huge positive on my own, a really huge positive, especially for a story like this, to incorporate cliches in a manner that actually work very well, is not only a really big thumbs up in my honest opinion, but really goes to show you that even cliched concepts and things can be used properly if incorporated and explained in a realistic manner, like with this story. People, when I say this, use this story as a proper example if you ever think about using cliches, even though you really shouldn't. But if you are going to use them, incorporate them in a proper way like the story did. Use it as an example. Take notes if you have to. Because this right here can be a really creative way of actually incorporating things that, are usually overused, but using it in a manner in a way that's proper. Now, we're also getting into the part where the game itself is actually starting to get played. Now, of course, there is the mentionings of, purgatory and a few other things like such, which, in all due retrospect, I'm willing to excuse because there's nothing really objectionable about the whole thing, to be completely honest. It's just the name, to be honest. A little bit silly, I'll admit, but to be honest, especially given with how the game flows out, which, by the way, the flow with everything that went on with this creepypasta was actually pretty good. Like, no doubt in my mind, was actually a pretty good, startup, I guess you could want to call it. Which, again, big giant positive. But of course, throughout the actual gaming story along the lines, there's actually a lot of believable aspects to it, especially given the fact that this was likely a tampered game. Like the title says, it's a tampered Spyro video game that somebody messed with. So, seeing all these different kinds of changes and things like that is very much believable because, people can do that kind of thing, especially if you've had a whole lot of years of practice when it comes to that kind of thing. And the explanation and everything within the actual storyline was, again, very believable. And what I love the most is that there was no mentioning of blood or gore or things like that. Yes, there were mentioning of skeletons and things, but honestly, it's really not that bad, to be honest. It really isn't. And I genuinely loved the attention to detail that was put into the storyline and the actual video game itself, because I could visualize everything quite well with the story, which, again, is awesome. Because it goes to show the amount of love and effort and time that was put into the story to really give it something new, but also incorporating a couple of other, unsavory cliches, but incorporating them in a manner in a way that's actually believable, and adds like a different kind of taste, so to speak, if you really want to put it that way. Now, with that said, the rest of the story itself goes by fine. The description of the video game is also very believable as well. And, of course, the ending is, again, pretty awesome. However, there are a few little issues that I do think I need to make a mention of, that I do have with this creepypasta. They're not a whole lot, but they definitely are there. For example, there is the demonic card that is put into it. I mean, again, understandable, as somebody could easily hack this kind of thing, but it wasn't exactly as properly incorporated in the story as the other cliches were. Which, to me, was like a bit of a, basically, to me personally, it just didn't exactly work out too well. The other ones, they did fine. This part didn't really do a whole lot. And, overall though, what else was there? There's really nothing really else that's honestly bad about the story. I mean, maybe that might be then again, that's my own thoughts. If you guys disagree, that's fine. But basically, the whole thing and the ending. I love the ending. The fact of the matter that, there's a logical ending and explanation, so to speak, about the whole thing, about, there was no way that this was ever truly wanted for the game, prototype or not, which is believable, and it was brought up in the next staff meeting and things like that. And that, obviously there's no real information because nobody knows who made the entire disc. Nobody really got much of an idea or a clue about what happened or how it all happened. So in retrospect, everybody's just kind of left, with no answers whatsoever, which adds, which honestly I have to say adds a lot more to the story itself, because it makes you wonder, what was the whole reasoning behind, the change of the creepypasta? Why was, the change of the game, who changed it? Why did they change it? There's like a couple of subtle hints throughout the story, but then again, I guess that's something for all of us to decide, which in retrospect, really isn't that bad. It's not a bad way of ending it. And I have to commend the author for this. Even though it's been a while since you wrote a creepypasta, you did a very good job with this creepypasta. I have to say, I'm actually pretty impressed with how it went out. You managed to sit there and not only incorporate cliches in your story, but incorporated them in a manner that was actually very believable and didn't ruin the story in any manner or in any way. Which, again, is a very huge positive. So, to the author, you did a very good job with this creepypasta. I have to say, I'm very happy with how it went out. The grammar is beautifully done, the paragraph structuring is great, the story flowed out well, it was very easy to read, there was no grammatical problems, grammatical issues, the punctuation marks were perfect in the story. Seriously, this is a creepypasta that honestly deserves a lot more love than what apparently it isn't getting. And I'm hoping that this video will honestly help spread the whole thing with this creepypasta for you guys to enjoy. But of course, like I always say with these creepypastas, this is simply my own personal opinion, and if you disagree with it, that's perfectly fine too. We're all entitled to our own opinions in regards to these creepypastas, and this is simply my own personal thoughts. My final rating of the story would have to be a 9 out of 10. A great creepypasta, very enjoyable, incorporated cliches properly, with 1 or 2 exceptions that is, which is why it's not a full 10 out of 10. Very enjoyable, very believable I might add, and ultimately just a very entertaining read and a great Spyro creepypasta. To the author, again, you did a great job with this, even after it's been a while. This goes to show you all that even if it's your first pasta, you can still come up with something absolutely beautifully done, well crafted, and amazing if you put a lot of love and time and effort into it. And if you really know what you're doing, you can even incorporate cliches in the stories that actually work. But it takes time to do that. But honestly, this story did a really good job. But of course, that's my own opinion. What did you guys think about this creepypasta? Did you guys enjoy it? Did you guys not? Also, what would you have personally done to help make the story a lot better? Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. I'm the Shadow Reader. Thanks again for watching today's episode, and if you're brand new here to this channel, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe because I make brand new videos every single day. And of course, like always, roll the outro because I'm out. Fear and surprise as your eyes widen, your mouth goes dry with each battered breath. You try to scream, your mind begs to leave, glued to your computer screen. The killers they slash, the tapes burn and crash. The cartridge you bought will be your final haunt. The rituals of hate will seal your fate. The tears you shed will be from the fear-gripping horror-driven nightmarish gore-filled, terrorizing, hateful, burning, violent, rage-inducing, knife-slashing, blood-splattering, silent screams. Only time will tell if you will escape this online hell. Your horror-filled obsessions will come with its own regressions. Your pathetic screams will not be heeded in any way, because your nightmares will come at any day.